in Nawashair, Punjab. I've discovered another interesting piece of history. This spare land that we see here out before once used to be the outskirts of this huge fortress, I believe, or fort possibly. But we can see ahead of us the small bricks that were historically used for the building infrastructures. And what's interesting here is the local relatives of mine that pretty much lived as part of this fortress, have now moved, have told me that this fortress used to be a lot bigger than you can see. So these bare walls that you can see have actually been dug out. So where this line is, it goes all the way down. This actually used to be walls. But again, there was no attention given to it by the government as a respected monument or a piece of heritage. And it was actually called Bedian Qila, so the fortress of the Bedis. Now again, what's interesting is that Gunachaur was part of the Bedi lineage. And we know the Bedi lineage spread across into different areas. But there's a very interesting connection here, because to the left of where I'm filming, we'll cover it a bit later on, there's actually a Gurdwara Sahib, and it's called Tapastan Baba Sahib Singh Ji Bedi, who we know again was a very famous Sikh in our history, and he was part of Guru Nanak Dev's lineage. So it's very interesting, because it could possibly be that this fortress belonged to members of Guru Nanak Dev's lineage, because if Tapastan Bhai Baba Bedi Sahib Singh Ji is also here, then surely this is where they would have once resided, which is a very valuable piece of history for us as Sikhs. Now all this that we can see is empty space was actually craned out, so the locals used it. You can see here from far the village is the joining villages, but my uncle has told me that they actually used the mud and the mortar and the brickwork of this fortress to actually raise the buildings in the village and to fill holes in the ground and to make sarovars, pools of water, make them more permanent. So it's actually a hill where I've travelled up from. And we know historically fortresses and forts were always on a high place. We know that from our history from Guru Gobind Singh Ji's time. And sometimes people ask that what's all this got to do with Sikhi, or why do I show so much interest? It's because this heritage gives us key clues to our own history. We can learn a lot from it, and how Guru Gobind Singh Ji would have strategically planned their fortresses, their buildings. So as we're walking ahead now, we can see all these new houses have been built here. There still remains of the old brickwork. So as we're walking up this path, which was actually built quite modern, this path was actually created recently. But it never used to be once before. So my uncle has told me that this was the initial path, which we will go down a bit later on. And again, something interesting, there's a well. As we come back down, you'll see that later on, that belonged to the Bedis as well. So the whole perimeter of this fortress was absolutely huge, as you can see. So even here we can see the old brickwork. These are all walls of the old fortress. And as we go up the hill here, it's actually a small attraction now where people come and visit it. But all of this used to be old brickwork before. A lot of houses used to be here. My uncle's house used to be up here as well. But they soon moved just down the hill from where I started recording from. again, another key piece of history because it shows how things change over history, how residence changes over history. That applies to our historical Gurdwara as well. There's no doubt that things would have changed over time, and things don't always stay as we think they maybe should have stayed. But this is all that's left of the main building, if you like. And if we come and read here, it says Bindu Vikas Ate Panchayat Vibhag Punjab. So the key members of the village, Gram Panchayat, Gunachaur, Balak, or Jila Shaheed Bhagat Singh Nagar Vikhe Park da Udghatan. So what they've done is they've actually created a park here, which we can see here. They actually created a park here. So this is a place where obviously people can publicly come and enjoy leisure. But it seems that it was too late before any steps were taken to preserve this history. Obviously it says the name here, Manyog Sri Kuljit Singh Sarhal, and the date there, so 2023 they actually opened this park here. So it was very late before they took any sort of steps to preserve this. There's an old one here, Is Panchayat Imarat Qila, so it was a fort for sure. The Murammat Ate Pakiai Da Kam Samut Panchayat Membran. So they try to renovate it in some way, they try to preserve it in some way. Sri Madan Mohan Singh Sarpanch, so that was the name of the person who led the project, and that was in April 2013. So again, it was way too late before any steps were taken here to preserve this place. But we were pretty high up, so you can get an idea of from ground level how high this fortress used to be. Again, my uncle was telling me that there were only two people that were allowed to come up the pathway to the fortress. That was people who would be coming up to take waste away, or people who would be coming up to bring water for the residents of the fort. So it shows us how powerful these people were. But it's known, like I said, as Bedian and Qila. Now they belong to the Bedis, and for sure it seems to me as though this was part of a family that was part of Guru Nanak Dev's lineage. Otherwise it can't be a coincidence that Baba Sahib Singh Bedi, who's also got a nickname of Kalatari because of his spiritual prowess that he had Pakistan, just there where that blue Nishan Sahib is. So you can see there's that big bead, that big arrow, the blue Nishan Sahib, and that's where the Gurdwara is. That's its Pakistan. And as we go around, pretty much this fortress covered all that area. So in reality, this fortress probably did belong to the lineage of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, but you know, again, as a community, we've kind of ignored it, and we've not really taken, you know, much importance. But my uncle came here from Lenda, Punjab, in 1947 after the partition. So they were on the other side. They were removed here, replaced here, and he kind of recalls all this history from that time, from 47. So I'm just relaying everything that I've learnt from him in English for the public, so we can record it as history. We'll go inside and have a look. Obviously we've got these old arches that people used to use for lights. And I mean, look at the brickwork, it's completely solid. And even my uncle's house, we'll go there later on, he's still got parts of his house that have this brickwork in it. So again, that must have also been part of the fortress. And he said since he's been here in 47, he's not seen the cement move here. That's how solid these buildings are, the architecture. And he goes, you know, the buildings you make today, look, I mean, there's already cracks in the cement here. There's already cracks in the cement and it's modern. Whereas this old brickwork, like I said, New York architecture specialists or engineers, they can't figure out the materials that were used, how they made things so solid. But you can see that dome kind of roof there. and this is like the main portion that's left. Seems now that it's used by people of the Islamic faith or different sorts of faiths that come here to kind of worship, but it's a very interesting piece of history for me because who knows who this belonged to. And again, what's noteworthy is these walls, look at the thickness of them. They are 4 feet in length. That's the thickness of the wall. So how well insulated and solid these buildings were. Again, we learn about the Gadi of Chamkaur Sahib. When we speak to local residents there, they also tell us that the walls used to be 4 foot in thickness, and this is about 4 feet. So at that time, the width of the walls were 4 feet. We can learn that from architecture now, you know. So it tells us a lot. We learn a lot from these kind of buildings in history. Even myself, when I'm researching history and presenting it, to think about things from a load of different angles. There's so many different perspectives that one has to consider before they present history. And these kind of clues play a big part in what we're presenting today, which is why it's crucial that we visit sites like this and we speak to locals, because that's where we're going to gain this knowledge from. They fill the gap that maybe even literature hasn't recorded. So all this here used to be houses. That we can see now is just plants, overgrown plants and grass and trees. This is actually where my uncle's house used to be. And then obviously they demolished the houses and they went down because it was too difficult for them to bring things up into the houses. So they kind of left the residents from up here and went down. But this, what we see here, what I've showed you here, from the residents locally here, this is half of what it used to be in 1947. So when they came from that side of Punjab in 1947, there was double this, what we see here. So it shows just how much we've lost in, what, 80 years, and it's still not being preserved. You know, what's to say in the next 8 years, what will we have to give us clues? You know, the new historians of the time, what will they have to look at and give clues? So as we go down, so here is the well that my uncle showed me, and this was the well that belonged to the residents of the fortress. So we're going to go and have a quick look into it. There's some Hindi writing in there. It's definitely been cemented, but there, if we look close enough, we can't see it in the camera, but right at the bottom of that well is a very deep well. It's a absolutely, you know, that must go down at least 50 feet. But at the bottom of it, you can see there's an old brick at the bottom of it. So again, it's definitely an old well that's still here, and this was their well. So this was their source of water that they used to use. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because this is all part of the fort, Tikunji, and that was called Bedian the Khu. So that was their well, basically. And again, what's so interesting here again is my uncle mentioned that, I said, where did they go? So look again here, we see these old bricks here again. Again, all part of the fortress. So you can see the remains of it as we walk around. You can still see the remains of that building. The most interesting point, my uncle said that, I said, where have they all gone then? Because you've been here since 47. Where have the residents gone? He goes, well, they're gone to scatter to different places. But one place he mentioned, interestingly, was Unna Sahib. And we all know that Gunachaur Dev Ji, there's Bedi lineage in Unna Sahib. We've all heard of Gunachaur Singh, the Kirtani. And we know in Unna Sahib there is lineage even today that belongs to Gunachaur Dev Ji. So again, this all connects back to Guru Nanak Dev Ji's lineage. This fort, according to my research, must have belonged to the lineage of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And as a Sikh community, I mean, where's it gone? Talk about Chamkaur Sahib, that's really far away. I mean, fortresses like this, are not been preserved whatsoever. But this is the path that we've come up. There's even actually old brickwork on the floor as well that we can see as we go around. But the old pathway actually goes this way here, down there. But there's so much that I was shown. I'm not sure if I've done justice to it enough, but I've tried to reconvey as much information as possible. But again, look, it's the remains, the ruins of what once was, I suppose, a splendid fortress. And I'm just going to go into my uncle's house and show you the remains of the old brick there. Because I think, again, it's still standing structure. It's been there since before 1947, and it's still standing strong. So it shows just how strong the materials were that they used at that time. And I'm sure it must have been part of this old fortress, because as we look here from the outside of the house, you can see the old brickwork here, right there. So that's actually my uncle's house now. And that's the old brickwork still there. So surely from here, outskirts, all the way here, all of this that we see, all the way up there was one big huge fortress that's now been used to fill holes, to fill ponds, to raise building structures. People were actually selling mortar from here, so they were breaking things down with a crane, filling trolleys full, taking it down with tractors and selling it to builders. So this has basically been built, it's been sold, it's been used for other construction, and it's gone just like that. And what's interesting is how many other structures like this have disappeared just like that over the years. So I'm just going to go to my uncle's house now and show you the remains here of the old, which I believe must have been part of the old fortress, because how's the old brickwork still here? We look here, structure still standing strong. Inside here we can see the old brickwork. Obviously that's been renovated, but the old brickwork is still visible very clearly right there. You can see the old arches that used to be on houses. They're still standing strong, the structure, look. The building, the brickwork, the small bricks. And another interesting point my uncle made was how hard must have been the labourers at that time. Because how long would it take to build a structure of those small bricks compared to the thick, big ones that we use today, these type ones? Obviously a lot more bricks would have been used. So imagine, just think about this small brick, think about how much effort must have been taken. I mean, that's the size of one brick right here. If we look here, that's the size of one small brick, which is probably 25% of the modern brick. So, 4 times as hard, definitely, they would have had to work to build these. And they're solid. The solid structures still don't move. Look in here, you can still see the old brickwork inside the house. And this is actually my uncle's old house. So when they came from the top of the hill, they actually used to live in this here. And then from here, as obviously they grew financially, they moved over and they kind of built more to their house. But it was very interesting for me, and definitely something I wanted to share with the viewers, definitely something to think about. But thank you all for listening and viewing. And again, that Gurdwara Sahib, Nishan Sahib, is still standing tall there. It's still in construction from what I've been told. I'm sure once it's complete, there'll be more history there that we can read upon, and that'll tell us a million stories. But by then we'll be regretting that, well, where's the Tapastan gone of Baba Sahib Singh Ji Bedi? But thank you all for listening. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।